All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's event, Transnational Black Feminisms and Activism in Latin America and the Caribbean, a conversation with Laura Hall, Tito Mitjan-Zalayon, and Jamila Ribeiro. I'm Julia Bird, the Vice Chair at the UC Berkeley Center for Latin American Studies, and I'm happy to welcome you all today. I'm happy to be here and to have the opportunity to open the second event in this series, AfroLatinx Voices. The AfroLatinx Voices series presents a number of roundtable discussions between Black scholars, activists, and artists from across Latin America and the Caribbean. Each conversation seeks to address how race, Blackness, and anti-Blackness are transnationally informed in conversation across borders, languages, and identities. As with every great event, this one has a multitude of people who've worked behind the scenes to make it come to life. It's presented by the Blackness in Latin America and the Caribbean Working Group and co-sponsored by the Center for Latin American Studies at UC Berkeley, or CLAS. CLAS serves as the heart of Latin American studies at Berkeley. Our mission is threefold. First, to create a community of Latin Americanist scholars and practitioners. Second, to develop innovative policy solutions through a unique network. And third, to enhance public understanding of Latin American culture and politics. This event and the rest of the series would not be possible without the generous support from numerous units across the Berkeley campus. Thank you to the Departments of African American Studies, Gender and Women's Studies, English, Comparative Literature, Ethnic Studies, and Spanish and Portuguese, as well as Professor Nadia Ellis and the Doreen B. Townsend Center for the Humanities. And thank you to the leaders of the Blackness in Latin America and the Caribbean Working Group, John Mondell and Nicole Ramsey. In a minute, I will hand you over to the moderator for today's event, Ashley Agbasoga. But before I do that, let me provide a brief introduction. Ash, as I get to call her now that I've met her through Zoom, is a PhD candidate in the Department of Anthropology at Northwestern University with a graduate certificate in Black Studies, as well as a 2020 to 2022 predoctoral fellow at the Carter G. Woodson Institute for African American and African Studies. Ash's work involves Black Indigenous geographies and the Mestizo state in Mexico, and I can say that I feel lucky that we have her moderating this exciting event today. During the event, we welcome questions from the audience and have enabled the Q&A feature on Zoom, which you should be able to see below my face and the bar down below at the bottom of the Zoom window. And now I will turn it over to Ashley Agbasoga. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever everyone is. Thank you, Julia, for that really wonderful introduction. My name is Ashley Agbasoga, and I will be the moderator for today's panel. I'll give a little bit of a description of this event, followed by introducing our wonderful speakers today. In 1988, Lélia Gonzalez wrote Por un feminismo afro-latinoamericano, or in English, for an Afro-Latin American feminism, urging for the examination of the intersections of gender, Blackness, indigeneity, and class. Her declaration and the legacy of Black and Indigenous women throughout the hemisphere continue to shape liberatory movements into the 21st century. In this second event, we bring together three activist scholars across Latin America and the Caribbean, Tito Mitjan-Zalayon, Laura Hall, and Jamila Ribeiro, to discuss the roles that transnational Black feminisms have had in activism and movements throughout the region. So without further ado, let me introduce our three panelists today. The first will be Tito Mitjan-Zalayon, who has a doctorate in feminist studies and intervention from, I guess the acronym is UNICACH in Chiapas, Mexico. Mitjan-Zalayon is an Afro-Cuban feminist, activistics, non-binary, transmasculine historian whose research areas also include Black feminism, queer and trans Afro-diasporic studies, and critical studies of the Black Atlantic. He holds a master's in interdisciplinary studies of Cuban, Caribbean, and Latin American history as well from the University of Havana. Tito has a long history of activism, including on topics for workshops around Black women, trans, non-binary, and fat bodies, as well as heteropatriarchal violence within the feminist collective Observatorio Feminista contra la Violencia in Aguascalientes, in Zacatecas. And in Cuba, Tito developed an Afro-Cuban queer project in 2013 to 2015 called Motivito, or Get Together in English, that focused on creating spaces of healing, knowing, and celebrating queerness and Blackness, using art as an instrument of social protest. Jamila Ribeiro is a Black Brazilian feminist philosopher, journalist, and activist on the streets and in the interwebs. She is the author of 3 books. This is in Portuguese. I'm not a Portuguese speaker, but okay, é lugar de fala, or what is locus of speech in 2017. Quem tem medo do feminismo negro, who's afraid of Black feminism, and Pequeño Manual Antirracista, Little Anti-Racist Handbook in 2019. Jamila has received several awards in Brazil and abroad for her scholarship in activism, and just last week, Jamila's most recent book, Pequeño Manual Antirracista, won Brazil's prestigious Jabuti book prize in the social sciences category. Last but certainly not least, Laura Hall is a Black Costa Rican human and ethnic rights activist. She is the current vice president of Costa Rica's chapter of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, past vice president of the Organización Negra Centroamérica, or in English, the Black Central American Organization, and founding member of the Youth and Leadership Program of the Asociación Proyecto Caribe, or the Caribbean Project Association. Active in local and national politics, she served as the candidate for vice president of Costa Rica on the Frente Amplio party ticket in 2018. Since 2013, she has been a member of the of the United Nations, High Commission on Human Rights for Afro-Descendants. Please join me in welcoming these 3 amazing panelists today. Tito, you are up first.
Thank you so much. I'm just gonna put my clock so I can have my 5 minutes. So I want to start first thanking to Ashley Ngozi Abagosa for this beautiful invitation. Also, I would like to express my gratitude to the Center of Latin American Studies of the University of California, Berkeley, to Jon Mondel and all the people that got in contact with me to finally make this conversation happening today. Finally, I would like to express my gratefulness to be in a panel with Jamila Ribeiro and Laura Hall. I follow very close the work of Jamila Ribeiro since 2019, when I was introduced to her work by an Afro-Brazilian friend who was in San Cristobal for an interchange with her university program, Aline Moura. So here in Chiapas, in the southeast of Mexico, where politics of anti-Blackness, desterritorialización, I can't say that in English, sorry, functions precisely. It couldn't erase the strongest networks of the Black diaspora. And I would like to focus on the implications of the Black, queer, and trans diaspora. And that for that reason, I would like to start with an act of recentering the word itself. What did diaspora mean to me? The invention of the white mestizo projects of borders, and well, this means to me like the invention of the white mestizo projects of the borders and the historical process of fugitivity and marriage that continued through the present, and as I am part of too, because I run from the cold socialist plantation in Cuba. So what means an Afro-diasporical feminism? In the same way that I read the book of Jamila Ribeiro and the amazing work of Carla Cotirene, I also read Lélia Gonzalez, Concepción Evaristo. I watched Ori de Beatriz Nacimiento, and I read Ciule Carneiro's work, and the works are intrinsicamente embedded in my activism as also in my PhD works. Also, I have read the work of many Black feminists through América Latina, such as the work as the beautiful poem of Shirley Campbell, Rotundamente Negra, who travels through the whole Black diaspora. I remember starting this diasporic reading with 20 years old. I read Limon Blues, a novel from Limon in Costa Rica. From that, I learned that there were Black people in Costa Rica, and there were also the Garifonas and the Unia. From that, I learned also that it was Black people everywhere, despite the white mestizo Cuban narratives that locate Black people in determined geographies and erase us from the places that they were felt is important. So for me, Black feminist cartographies was a beautiful and important tool to position myself in this territory where I live now for more than 5 years. In this positionality, I would like to locate my work at the present of Black trans feminism. I took the term Afro-Trans Feminism from an article that Maria Clara Araujo, Erika Hilton, and Giovanna Eliodoro, Black trans activists from Brazil, coined in 2018. They were interested in locate and politicize the experience of Black trans women in Brazil. Their political position came from this Black radical tradition of the Black movement and the necessity to build a trans feminism that that a trans feminism interseccionalizado between gender, race, with the work of also this long body of knowledge of the Black radical tradition. So I want to honor these three Black women for their work. This category, Afro-Trans Feminism, allowed me to incorporate myself in a growing trend of new ways of feminism, even though there is a long historical practice which have been Black and survived at the margin of this heteropatriarchal system imposed over the Black bodies, as Spiller said in her work, Mama's Baby, Papa's Maybe, in 1988, which we question the essence of the binary gender system of the colonial process, and we exposed the colonial life of this binary fictions. So in this place in Chiapas, Blackness is under everything. So Afro-Trans feminist perspective not only prioritize the Black bodies, but also the Black bodies who transcend the gender binary system, the heteronormative structures that are racialized in this mestizaje speech that makes us in a fog that doesn't allow us to see more than the aspirations of Blackness. So finally, I just want to say that the term Afro-Trans Feminism proposes Afro-centered focus from the voices of the Black transvesties, Black transmasculine, the Black trans women, the non-binary, all the Black and queer, Black trans and queer community itself. So well, I just want to leave it here, and I hope that we can be in conversation for the rest of the talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tito. Next, we have Jamila Ribeiro.
Hi to everyone. Good evening or good night. In Brazil, it's good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank for the invitation. I'd like to thank the Blackness in Latin America and Caribbean Working Group and the Center for Latin American Studies for this invitation. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm very glad to be in a round table with Tito, Alayon, with Ashley and Laura Hall. For me, it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to share with you. I'm going to read some parts because my English is better when I read. In order to open my reflection here, I'd like to present, for those who do not yet know Lélia Gonzalez, this great woman. Who is in the very basis of Black feminism in Brazil. She was a professor at Pontifical Catholic University in Rio de Janeiro, and an important figure at the Black feminist movement, and an active critical writer between the 70s and the 90s. Among several international pioneers, she anticipated the needs of a transnational struggle, and even proposed a category called Americanity. Unfortunately, Brazilian Black women has the barrier of the language, being Brazil the only country on the continent which speak Portuguese, the Brazilian Portuguese, actually. I wrote an article a couple months ago called Considerations of Africanity, and I argue in this article that being a Black woman in Brazil, you learn to deal with all the usual challenges that arise, but outside the borders of the country, you face even higher barriers to progress, to do a lack of knowledge and understanding of what happens in the north of Ecuador. In Brazil, Black feminists are in a certain isolation due to the language barriers. It is the only country in the Americas where Portuguese is an official language. To this is added the new colonial attitude that only what is produced in Europe or in the United States has any real worth, including, ironically, everything to do with decolonization. In short, because of our position in the global geopolitical arrangement, the production of Black Brazilian intellectuals tends to be much less widespread, causing, I don't know if delays or causing some kind of delays maybe in debates that could be much more advanced, especially if we think of countries that have a certain similarity to the historical construction of Brazilian races. So Lélia Gonzalez reflections on the idea of Africanity, proposing an identity for the peoples of the Americas and Caribbean was very important. Even back in the 80s, she was articulating the transnational struggle of the Fellowship of Black and Indigenous Women, questioning the imperialist paradigms of Black denominations in the American continent in order to achieve another view of struggle. I'm going to quote now Lélia Gonzalez. It's interesting to see someone who leaves Brazil, for example, saying they are going to America, and that all of us from any region of the continent have repeated the same notion, perpetuating the imperialism of the United States, calling its inhabitants Americans, and what we are. As for us Blacks, how can we achieve an effective awareness of ourselves as descent of Africans if we remain prisoners, captives of a racist language? That's why I propose that we use the term Africans to designate all of us. Although we belong to different societies on the continent, we know that the system of domination is the same in all of them. That is racism, discord, and extreme elaboration at all levels of thought, as well as part and parcel of the most different institutions of these societies. The political and cultural implications of the category of Africanity are in fact democratic, precisely because the term itself allows us to overcome the limitations of territory, language, and ideological character, opening new perspectives for a deeper understanding of that part of the world where it manifests itself. End of the quote. So for me, reading Lélia Gonzalez's work, when in the 80s, she was proposing the Africanity as a concept of transnational struggle. It's very powerful, but you have, I think also you have to discuss this colonial politics of translation that is still very colonial, and Lélia Gonzalez's work is not recognized as it should be, even in Brazil, because in Brazil, we have to face a very Eurocentric academia. But even when you talk about Black feminism, how it's important to think about the Afro-Latina feminism. Through this thought of Lélia Gonzalez here in Brazil, of course, it's not easy to face this colonial view, but as Lélia Gonzalez used to say, our legacy is not only a legacy of pain, but also a legacy of struggle and a legacy of resistance, a legacy of power. So through this legacy in Brazil, today I coordinate a collection of books called Plural Feminism. And we have already published 8 authors, Black authors, male and female. And because for me, it was very important to in somehow organize this thought. And I also coordinate a seal called Sueli Carneiro, in honor to Sueli Carneiro, who is a very important Black feminist in Brazil. And I think how it's important to honor Black women when they are alive. And through this seal, we have already published 3 books. The last one, Quilombola Women, that we published this book written by 18 Black women from different quilombos in Brazil. And next year, we are going to publish Transfeminism and Transfeminism, Colorism, and Domestic Work. It's the 3 books that we're going to publish in 2021. And I think it's, and now we are in this project to translate these books. Some of these books were translated to French, Spanish, and Italian. And I think it's a way to do this transatlantic, do this trip to the transatlantic in another view. Now we are coming back with our reflections from the global south, and we are also make visible our reflections in Brazil, in Latin America, and I think it's a way to face all these colonial politicas of translation. But I think Lélia Gonzalez was the most important figure for this project, and how she, her work was very important to us to do this, what we are doing in Brazil. And even being an independent project, we are in several regions of Brazil, because the books, they have affordable prices, and also following what Lélia Gonzalez taught us, using a language that is democratic, because language is power, and we didn't like to write in academic language, because our goal is to be accessible for our people, especially in Brazil, and most of the poor people in Brazil are Black. So I think these books, even being independent projects, they are spread in Brazil because of this concept of being democratic. And Lélia Gonzalez was also the figure that inspired us to do this work. So I think I had my 7 minutes, and then I wait for sharing later with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jamila. And last but certainly not least, we have Laura Hall.
Thank you so much, Ashley. First of all, I would like to say good day, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you're seeing us and following us. I would also like to give thanks for the gift of life and the victorious struggle of our foremothers and forefathers, who paved the way with blood, with tears, with sweat, with courage and determination, and defiant laughs also. But most important, with concrete actions, so that we, as souls living in a physical experience in this dimension, can become the dream that they had for themselves, and even the dreams that they didn't even dare to think about. I thank and recognize the Blackness in Latin American Caribbean Working Group, alongside the University of California, Berkeley Center for Latin American Studies also, for inviting me, and Nicole Ramsey especially. Thanks for the invitation to share my experiences with you, and I salute and recognize my co-speakers, the Jamila, abrazos mi hermano, and Tito, gracias por existir. I can already feel the good vibration of this, our first virtual encounter. Also, I would like to acknowledge the audience who are tuned in right now and who gave us their valuable time, and for supporting these initiatives. I would like to start by talking about my place of enunciation, because I really believe that it is important for people to know where we come from, how we do exist, and this had shaped also our thought process. So that being said, I would like to explain the history of many of us Africans born in Central America, and specifically Africans and African descent, people of African descent who are in the Caribbean side of Costa Rica. So as most of us, obviously, they started with the transatlantic trade of enslaved peoples in order to build capitalism, or in order to build the system as we know it. Our experience says that our forefathers and our foremothers marooned in the island of Jamaica, some in Jamaica, some in Barbados, some in Guyana, and you name the island. We had marooned, in my personal case, to Trilani in Jamaica. And from there, they started to grow their food, to farm their food, and also to build communities out of scratch, and understanding and reminding the importance of that survival experience based on the collective efforts and the collective works, where men and women shared or invented a new language, had their own form of government with their own traditional democratically elected authorities, their indigenous schools where women had a pivotal and a very important role, and where we as women also transmitted the history and the culture, the traditional medicine, the therapeutics that allowed us to survive in these new places where we found ourselves after being kidnapped from our mother continent. The spirituality also as a philosophy that guided our lives, and be it clear that I'm talking about spirituality and not religiousness, and also the oral history, the way we lived in tune with nature or with the biodiversity, and the model of reciprocity in the way we function, the territories for production with spaces of common use, was all part of the organization of a community. So we were living like that in our islands, and then after at the end of the 1870s or 1860s, there was a sugarcane crisis. So the products that we were using to export and to get some income, economical income, had suffered. At the same time, we heard that there was the building of a canal in Panama and a railroad in Costa Rica. So our forefathers and foremothers came into that adventure with the idea of coming and going back to their places in the Caribbean, but they faced the first act of disillusion or non-recognition of their work. So they had been working and they did not receive paid, and the rest of this history is that we started to live at both sides of the railroad construction in the case of Costa Rica. After constructing a railroad, that was the basis for the economical boost of Costa Rica, since it allowed the people of the Central Valley in this country to be able to export the coffee which later became known as the golden grain or the golden seed of this country, and brought economical welfare or well-being to the rest of Costa Rica. And other history that another day I will tell you guys about, and understanding also and recognizing that we are not only the only wave, nor the first wave of Afro-Caribbean people in this place. Why I say so? I say so because on some of our parents' side of the family, since the 1600s, we've been inhabiting the Southern Caribbean of Costa Rica. And even before that, we all know that we were here before Christopher Columbus, living and trading without having to conquer or colonize or do away with people in order to live. And also understanding that, as Jamila said, and also Tita referred to, we are also people who have contributed, and women who had contributed to this place, and understanding that many of us have a matriarchal lineage and understand the world and see the world through other lens, that when it gets in encounter with this other civilizations or other group of people that we have to live among, then start to adjust. And by adjusting, adjusting and trying to seek the inclusion that we need in order to progress. In that context, we are, I don't like to use the word victims, but then it is. We are victims of a system that does not recognize our indigenousness, if that is a word, and if not, I just invented it. So the fact that we have been here, understanding also that the continent of Africa is where life came from, as we know it. So this being said, I also would like to talk about the importance of the participation of women and the historical participation of women in the system of organizing the community in the political, and not talking about politics or political issues as political parties, but understanding politics and the policy as the way we do incidents, or we make incidents in order to change the realities that we are facing. And I hope I have not passed my 5 minutes, but I think we could discuss this later on. But there is also an ethical compromise that we have in the spaces where we go and the spaces we access. And I would like also to talk to you about the process of the Central American Black Organization that happens to be the reunion and the networking of more than 40 grassroots and non-governmental organizations from the countries of Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, and Afro-Central American people living in the United States, who come together and learned about each other when they met the first time and started working in a transnational way, because we understood then, and we understand now 25 years later, that the only way that our communities and our women's are going to be the architectures of their own destiny is by having an international approach to the issues that we face. So that said, I'm so excited and I'm thankful for the time you have given me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lara. And thank y'all so, so much. I feel like I'm on the verge of tears, so I might cry here and there throughout, because this is honestly one of the most powerful conversations I've been blessed to be a part of. So thank y'all. Thank y'all so much for your presence, for your commentary. Yeah, I mean, this can be a conversation. One of the like central tenets of this panel, I think, is to bring voices from what we understand as Latin America and the Caribbean, but voices that are not concentrated in one place. So Jamila, you're in the land known as Brazil. Tito, you're currently in Chiapas, which is in the land known as Mexico. And Lara, you're currently in Costa Rica. So if y'all would like to give more to the conversation around transnationalism, and particularly the ways in which our communities should build and why they should build across these colonial borders that have been imposed upon us. Anyone can go. Take your time.
Well, I think it's important to say that in 1985, here in Brazil, there was Afro-Latina meeting, a feminism with a lot of feminists from Latin America and Caribbean in 1985, and how this meeting was very important, especially for Black women in Brazil, because after this meeting, a lot of organizations, Black feminist organizations, were established in Brazil. And also there is a network, Black feminist, a network with Afro-Latina feminists. And I think it's very important to us also to rescue this kind of actions that the women before us did. Because sometimes we don't know about this history, and I think it's very important to take it back and to see how we can improve, or how we can go on, to continue building these bridges among us. When I was younger, I worked in a Black feminist organization in Santos. It's a city in São Paulo coast where I was born. And in this organization, actually, the name in English is something like Black Women Cultural House, something like that. And this organization was very important in Brazil, with Gueledés, which is the organization that Sueli Carneiro founded in the 80s, Fala Preta, a lot of organizations around Brazil. And this organization organized a lot of seminars. They were very important in the creation of public policies for Black people in Brazil. And this kind of work, I think maybe sometimes the new generation don't know about that. And I think it's very important to us to rescue this kind of political organizations, kind of political policies that these women have been built. So that's why I know that social media are important. I am a person who uses a lot of social media to spread the reflections on Black feminism, but sometimes I think we need to go back and to learn more about these women, about Luisa Bairros, about Licaneira, about a lot of women that were historically building this kind of movement, and how you can maybe, of course, you have different, each generation has their own challenge, but how can we work more in a network? But I think a way to do that is to rescue what these women have been doing historically. I think this meeting, for example, in 1985, we can see the videos. We have a platform in Brazil, a video platform called Cultine. So you can watch these women talking in 1985. And it's very powerful to know this history. I think we should maybe make visible this history. I guess it can be a way to work more in a transnational. It's not a challenge of our generation. I think these women who came before were doing that also.
I would like to add to what, I'm sorry, did you finish the Jamila? Oh, sorry, okay. So I would like to add to the importance of working across borders, because as we understand and as we know, we didn't have those borders before. Even in the mother continent, we had kingdoms, we didn't have countries. And the way for us, if we're facing similar problems, similar issues, the most, like, the basic way to face these issues is to work on global issues, of course, trying to attack them locally, but we need to have a global network of people, of like-minded people, and people who can understand, as we had done like that exercise in Central America. And I would like to maybe share that experience. When we started in the Central American Black Organization, we didn't even know that the countries next to us had people who looked like us. We knew more about African descent and African United Stations, or African Americans, as they're called. We knew more about the history of people far away, kilometers away from us, than the history of our Garinagu people in the region, or our Miskito people in the region, or our Congo community in Panama. So the fact that we had the opportunity to meet, just the encounter, and to speak and to know that some of them had that same, I would say, that same trip from the mother continent to this part, and some had a different trip, to understand those histories and how they're interrelated, because at the end we found out that some who are Garinagu and are living in, for instance, in Honduras, were family to the same Garinagu living in Belize, and those in Nicaragua, and then that the Creoles from Bluefields, Nicaragua, were family to these Afro-Caribbeans in Costa Rica, and that they also had ties to people in San Andres and Providencia in Colombia. So just breaking down that barrier, that mental barrier, and also the importance of knowing that the media, like the conventional media, would not portray that reality. So, and I salute and I greet the efforts that the Jamila just told us that she works on, the visibilization of our mere existence, starting by that. And then the visibilization of the work that we've been doing ancestrally. It's nothing new that women are at the head of governments. For us as people of African descent, it's not a new thing. That is not novel. It is novel in this part of the world, but it is not novel because we come from kingdoms ruled by women, and we come from maroons, or people who marooned, guided by women. So it's not like, I don't know how to break it down, but it's not like that big extra concept. It is in our DNA, but for us to manifest it in this time and space where we are living in these countries, then it needs in these countries where we are numerically minority, I don't know, like we're in less numbers if we count birders. But once you join all these birders and understand that we're more than 250 million people who look like us and who share our ancestral home and who share these ancestral notions, these ancestral concepts, then we can do a better job by making incidents. But if we start counting like the 500 more or less people of African descent in this country, and then we count the 5 millions in Panama, and if we count ourselves only in the geographical border that we are in, then we're going to look like minority. But when we count ourselves as a whole, and when we acknowledge that we anywhere we are, bear with me just a moment. Let me take off a sound here. Okay. So when we understand that we are powerful when we work in this collective way and that we're sharing similar issues. If I'm talking about lack of opportunities, every African descent throughout the continent would say, yes, our communities are suffering lack of opportunities. If I say that we're not in the development plans of our countries, then everybody's gonna be like, yeah, we need her. So we are facing the exact photocopy of oppression. How are we going to act to that? And the importance also of the links, of the networking in a transnational way, of the academia with those at the grassroots level and in the organizations. The thought, the space of thought and of understanding and creating that the academia have needs to be linked with those who are doing things, but maybe don't have the proper name for it in order to make incidents. I'm gonna put a brief example. For instance, right now they're talking about the climate change and the environment. That's a difficult word. Ambiente, environment. Okay, so the environmental impact of the climate change in our African descent communities. Okay, so people who don't understand us are coming to our communities and trying to lecture us on climate change when we're living on the coast, almost in the ocean, and when by centuries our great-grandparents and our parents have taught us how to live in harmony with nature. And because we have lived in harmony with nature, is that our communities are being claimed as national parks or national and nature sanctuary. But we as people inhabiting those places and preserving them are not recognized as the mastermind of this protection. And we're not recognized neither in the symbolic way, neither in the economic way, in no other aspect. But we've been seen again as victims of climate change. So I wanted to elaborate on that.
Well, thank you so much, Laura and Yamila. I just I want to follow you on your comments, and for that, I was thinking of the importance of an Afro-diasporical lens to see the Black struggle, and for instance, I have to say that I find the way transnational kind of like how can I say? A challenge for me, no, because I'm a migrant, so I don't see my process. Of course, I see my process of migration through the harness of borders because I am Cuban, so I have to present visa, bank account papers. I have to present so many papers. So the migratory border system allow me to go into a territory to another, that is overwhelming. No, it's kind of like the same process of academia. They're so sophisticated to make Black people going crazy to enter in these spaces of whiteness. No, so for me, transnationalism is complicated because the history that I came from. For instance, I am in Cuba. I grew up as a political, as an activist, as a feminist, as a queer, and later a trans person in the hip hop community. No, the hip hop community in Havana and in Santiago de Cuba was at one moment the only place where blackness, where the Afro-Cuban political movement could grow in one moment in Cuba in the early 90s. And the people who started the flame were the Black Panther who lives in Cuba. They were like, vamos. I remember Asata Shakur, I saw her just once. I don't know where she is. ¿Me oíste? And I remember Nahanda Biodun, that they were called like the godmothers of the Black Cuban hip hop movement. And these two women and the other Black Panthers who were in Cuba were giving to other folks como workshops of Black feminism, of Black history. And I know that in Cuba there's a long tradition of Black production of knowledge. We have very potent Black intellectuals, but the Cuban regime, how can I say, in their effort to end racism, it just erased the Black critical production. And with that, they erased very efficiently this Black radical production not from, but we didn't have access to in our early ages. Like, I didn't read Daisy Rubiera Reyita's book when I was in high school. Like, many people in the United States read the parable Sower in high school of Octavia Butler, you know? So this white project of this revolutionary Cuba, it was an erasing project of blackness, and it was very successful. And this Black Panther came, and then they brought with them like the rappers, and the rappers were like Erika Badu came to Cuba, Common Sense came to Cuba. So we as a Black Cubans, we were like, oh my God. And this, how can I say, this interaction, it fueled the movement so strongly that after that was a no return moment. So the Black Cuban movement of hip hop was the beginning of the Black Revolution that we have today. No, so the Black intellectuals came out of that intellectual closet of the revolution, start writing, start producing. There were more networks with people, mostly from the Black people from the US, but also if you go to Santiago de Cuba, Havana is like the capital of Cuba, no? Where there's 80% of Black people, but everybody wants to be white. And it's this, how can I say, this whiteness desire to be part of Latin America, when we all know that we are from the Caribbean, no? Cuba is an island in the Caribbean. We are Caribbeans. But if you go to Havana, the social imaginary is like, we're Cubans and we are from Latin America. I'm like, okay. But if you go to Santiago de Cuba, which is one of the eastern cities, Santiago de Cuba is called also like the capital of the Caribbean. No, it's a city full of Black people, and where Black people say that we are Caribbeans. So in this imaginary that we are part of the Caribbean, that for many of us Caribbeans, the Caribbean is predominantemente a Black region. So that means that we are transcending these narratives of whiteness, these narratives of erasure and what means with that, no, which has a lot of implications. But in Santiago de Cuba, there's also there it was and still is or are a very important movement of blackness, you know. And so when I hear because in Santiago de Cuba, there are a lot of students from a lot of countries from Africa, a lot of countries from the Caribbean. There's a lot of Jamaican people. There's a lot of people from Barbados. There's a lot of people from Haiti, which we have a long history of Caribbean migration to Cuba, no? And it's complicated because the process that happens with the Haitian people is that, ¿cómo se dice? Racismo haitiano it looks kind of like different. Like the same thing that happens with Dominican Republic, that they're so racist that they did these genocide policies until the present to Haitians. It also happens in Cuba, but because Cuba and the revolution, Fidel, nobody wants to talk about it, no. But everything that happened with Haitian and Haitian descendant in Cuba, it was very similar apartheid politics that happened in Dominican Republic, but we don't want to talk about it. And so all this migration process, which is very long and has so many reasons I don't have time to explain, it is the, how can I say, it challenged my idea of transnationalism, because as you said, as you put it, Laura, we are fighting from a very structured system that is the colonial neoliberal system, no? And this system, the objective of this system is to overexploit Black people and to erase in that process to Black people, so we cannot organize each other, create networks, and work to put an end to this colonial project, no? So for that, the Caribbean thinkers created a theory that I love, that is the theory of plantation studies, something like that. I don't remember really well. And that plantation studies or theory helps to understand como globally this project of white colonization, no? So for me, this is why transnationalism is kind of like, I don't know another word, I'm gonna say flaky. Hopefully one day my English will be better, I don't know. But at this moment I'm gonna use that word, because when you see us in this constant process of migration, running away, being a fugitive, being a maroon, borders has a different meaning. It's a meaning that is imposed. It's not a meaning that it's imposed to us. We are not, it's in our imaginary as the places that where we need to be more carefully, where we are more vulnerables, but not because we understood that aquí se acaba Panamá y aquí empieza Colombia o Costa Rica o sí, or bueno, yeah, okay. So with that, I want to say also, in this same way of Afro-diasporical length, I see the production of knowledge, because I love what Djamila was saying before, this colonial politics of translation. Like, I know English because I have to learn to read in English if I want to read the people that I know if I have to learn to read in English if I want to educate myself. Because everything that I learn in school, everything that I learn in university, even most of the work of the books, because I love reading, of the books that the people who loves me gave me in the past, were books that tell stories about white people, cis people, heterosexual people, and those stories doesn't represent me at all. So I start to look for the things that nurture me, that make sense to my experience. And and that's why I learned English very young. And at the same time, even that I don't fully understand, I'm grateful for Google Translator, but I am reading Portuguese since 2015, 2016, when I met these two Black Brazilian students, Mariel and Aline. I was like, there's not going back. I need to learn to read in Portuguese because I don't want to miss ever again the production of knowledge that Black women are doing in Brazil. And because this idea of borders also works with the idea of language. There's a very important poet and professor. Her name is Dion Brand, and she said that no language is neutral. I mean, if we're even talking in the imperial language, at least let's use it in a way that help us in our process of liberation. No? So in that way, I was like, I need to stop reading. Not as like I need to stop reading, but it's like I need to push me a little bit more to this comfort zone where I was. I was like, okay, I read in English. I read everything that all the the Black people in the U.S. or UK or even in the countries of the Caribbean that are writing are producing. But I was missing, like, I was missing a lot of stuff. So this year I participated in a course se llamó Afroqueridades, no? And I saw Black trans women that are professors in Brazil. I was in conversation with this student. He just finished his master's degree and he just published his work about transness in Candomblé, Claudia Nilsson Diaz. I was able to read the work of Maria Clara Araujo, and I was like, there's no way I'm gonna lose this. Because, like, it's not that we need all the experience. Yes, we need, but I, as a Black trans person, I need the work of the people who are thinking in conversation with me. No? So, and I needed to exist and I needed to expand it and I needed to problematize the politics of respectability of the Black communities, and I needed to, how can I say, visibilize and prioritize the people who are suffering the most this project of whiteness and eraserness. I don't know how to say that. So that's why I also read the work of Yamila Ribeiro. I read and I saw the work of Carla de Botirene. I read and I followed the work of there's another professor. She talks about Matri, la la la. I don't know, but she used the work of of Oyeronke Oyewumi, the Oshun.
Yeah.
And her name, damn, I'm so sorry, I cannot remember her name.
Oyewumi.
Yeah, but Oyewumi in her last book, she talks about Ochun, ¿no? Y de matrifocalidad y toda esta talla. But there's a professor in Brazil, it's another Black woman, and she recuperates Oyewumi's work, and with another professor, they position Black trans people in a possibility of success with pride, with dignity, with the blessing of the Ochun. And I'm like, yes, this is what we need. Because you can even imagine how much of the pathologization and criminalization and medicalization that the system put us, that we don't even have reference of existence besides all this discourse of death. And like, when I don't really know, because I haven't read the whole book of Oyewumi, because I think that she said something else, but the way that a lot of Black people in Brazil are using Ochun and Candomblé is to put Black trans people, Black trans women in the core of the conversation about the black lives with dignity. And I highlight that word because we have systematically treated as monsters and things that is awful, no? Even from our communities. So if you have if you have an Orisha that represent us, that give us their bless, it means that this puts a very different conversation in our communities. And from this conversation from our communities, then we have collaborations as the Amila, which Maria Clara insistently said that she's one of the great allies of the Black trans movement in Brazil. That's what we need. And from that, we can keep, and all the, como, I am so enthusiastic about this because then we have Black trans women in the parliament, como lo tienen en Brazil. And I'm like, of course, that for me, that's not gonna change the capitalism. But for us, it means a lot. And well, I just want to leave it there because I can keep talking. Thank you so much. Ashley, I cannot hear you. You're, I'm sorry.
All right. No, I was saying that everything that has been said here has been incredible, and my head is spinning. You know, particularly how Black feminisms throughout this hemisphere, throughout this globe, you know, knows no borders, right? We don't. The way we communicate within our and outside of our communities, you know, it's a language in which cannot be captured by coloniality. And a question that I wanted to kind of think through perhaps is the politics of translation. Jamila, you had mentioned earlier about the coloniality of translation, and I'm thinking in some ways how, you know, one, it's really important to emphasize the ways in which Black peoples and Africans have traveled, you know, regardless of borders, regardless of what the colonial narrative says, right, and have found ways to communicate with each other in ways that colonial history can never, ever even begin to capture, right? And so I wanted Jamila to speak a little more on, Jamila, what you mean concerning the colonialism of politics of translation, and also just acknowledge that, you know, this panel is in English, right? It is in the United States, which is an imperial nation, and so to think about that as well, on top of also the ways in which folks who are Black, of African descendants, in that are based in this imperial nation, such as the United States, also are finding ways to communicate outside of the rubrics of this nation state into communities throughout.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to acknowledge that and note that we will, inshallah, put captions and stuff in Portuguese, Spanish, and hopefully in French as well, which are also colonial languages, but that is the way in which we can communicate on a larger scale.
Oh, thank you for your question. I think, first of all, to analyzing Brazil, where I am, Brazil is a very colonial country, how the academia is very Eurocentric. We have, as Tito said, we have a long tradition Black feminism in Brazil, we have great thinkers, Black thinkers in Brazil. But even in Brazil, they are not recognized the way they should be. So I've studied philosophy. I have a master in political philosophy. It meant to study only white men from Europe during 40 years in my undergrad and after in my master. So everything I know about Black feminism, everything I know about indigenous knowledge, I have to fight to know about that. You have in Brazil, there is a law in Brazil, a 2003 law that implemented the obligation of Afro-Brazilian and African studies in schools, elementary schools. We have this law in Brazil, there is this law in Brazil, but we know that a lot of cities and states are not implementing this law. So I've studied in a school that told me that Black people were enslaved, and it was, that's it. So in schools. Um, so we have this problem in Brazil that even Brazilian people don't know our legacy of struggle. It's easier to academic person in Brazil knows about the revolution in France to know about the quilombos in Brazil. That quilombos were social organizations that Black people created to run away from slavery. It was places of socialism, before the communism. But nobody talks about that. And even the left-wing side in Brazil is very Eurocentric. So they look up to Europe. You know, they have anything against Marx, that is not that, but you want to talk about the Black intellectuals, the Black people that are talking about the slavery. We cannot about, it's impossible to talk about colonialism without talking about how in Brazil, for almost 4 centuries, the slavery was the basis of our economy here in Brazil. So Black people are poor in Brazil because we are Black. We are the largest Black population outside Africa. So Brazil, it's a country, we are not a minority in Brazil, but we are not in the space of power. We are not in television. We are not in academia the way you should be. So first of all, in Brazil. So Brazil has this missionary way to look to Europe, United States. They value what are being produced abroad, not abroad, only in United States, in Europe, because you have a lot of people that migrant people in Brazil from Latin America, but they are very discriminated in Brazil. But if you are from Europe, in Brazil, everybody will open doors for you. If you are from United States, everybody will United States. So Brazil, we have this mentality in Brazil that do not value our own culture. So in the idea that the Brazil state sell about Brazil is that Brazil is a very good country. We are a mixed country, everybody's happy. In Brazil, it's a very cool place, and people think about carnival, samba, the way they objectify Black women in Brazil, this idea of sexualization of Black women. So it's very hard to confront this idea inside Brazil, but this idea that they sell about Brazil. Every time I have been United States, in Europe, people, when they know that I am from Brazil, they look at me, oh, Brazil, oh, dance samba, oh, Brazil, sex women. So this is the idea that even sometimes in the Black communities outside Brazil, I hear this kind of thing. So this politics is we just import what is from Europe in Brazil. So we learn about that as the knowledge, as the hegemonic idea. But of course, I think it's important to talk about Black feminism in the United States. Of course, it's very important. These women, these thinkers, they inspired us. They are part of my bibliography. There is no question about that. And of course, these women, they are not hegemonic because they are in the global north. They are not hegemonic in the United States. But in Brazil, when you talk about Black feminism, people are going to talk about the Black feminism in the United States. These women are being translated in Brazil. I was part of a group who forced some published houses here in Brazil to publish Black women for the United States. And I think it's necessary now that in the United States, maybe these women do be forced to translate Brazilian Black feminists or from countries in South America. I think it's very important to do this relation of to trade experience, to share experience. I am a woman from Candomblé. I'm part of this religion in Brazil, and we believe in Candomblé that it's necessary to share. So, and we do. It's difficult sometimes when people don't know about Brazilian Black feminism, even when you have this tradition in thinking about that. So I think it's necessary for our sisters, for example, in another country to do this kind of efforts to translate other women from, especially from the global South. Here in Brazil, we are published Black women, Black men also, Black trans people also, but we are going to translate, for example, women from Latin America. We are in contact with some sisters in Latin America to translate these women here. So I think it's necessary also, if I am in Brazil, that's a very difficult country to be, and we are doing all this collective work to have access to another kind of reflections. I think it's important to our sisters in different countries to do the same thing. So my translator in France, she's a Black woman. My translator in Spain, she's a Black woman. We are working together, you know, to do this work. And I think to break this colonial wall in this this politics of translation. So people need to know about Lélia Gonzalez. People need to know about Sueli Carneiro, as we know about Angela Davis, as we know about Patricia Hill Collins. And when I say that, it's not in terms of competition, because these women are great, but it's in terms of to recognize Sueli Carneiro and Lélia Gonzalez and these women as they should be. So being in Brazil, to know, to learn another language, it's related to your social class, because you have to pay in Brazil to learn another language. You don't have in school Spanish as a second language, which is ridiculous, because we are here in Latin America and we don't speak Spanish. It's ridiculous how our government, our states in Brazil works in terms of not allowing us to learn different languages. It's very difficult to a Black person in Brazil to learn a different language, because it means that you have to pay private schools to do that. So I think we know the problem. We know that this wall exists. How can we build bridges between us? How can you do that as Black thinkers who are trying to think in a transnational way? And I think I feel, you know, I feel sometimes that here in Brazil, we are doing these efforts to know about a lot of people, but in other countries, maybe people are not so interested about what we are doing here. And I think it's necessary to us to work more in a network to do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to go to Q&A, but it looks like we may only have time for one or two maximum. So we're going to take a question from Misha Klein. Says, let's see, my question has to do with whether and how the rising and cyclic authoritarianism and violence in the hemisphere has affected your writing, activism, and networking.
Well, here in Brazil, we are under Bolsonaro administration. So we are facing a very conservative administration in Brazil. It has been very difficult. A lot of people had to leave Brazil because they are being threatened. Yeah, it's not easy. I receive threats, for example, sometimes, and as an activist, I have to be used to that. It's crazy. In Brazil, it's a very violent country for human activists. It's the fourth country in the world who kill a human activist. It's the fifth country in terms of feminicide. It's the fourth country in terms of child marriage. Brazil, it's a very violent country. It's very important to face this idea of a country where people are very happy. But as I am visible today in Brazil, the fact that being visible, sometimes it's people, I don't feel so that I am not so safe, because I have to admit that today in Brazil I have a visible. I'm a person who is visible. But of course, it's difficult. Sometimes I feel, of course, that I am afraid. Sometimes I have a teenage daughter, and a couple months ago she was threatened, and it's very difficult to deal with all this contest. But I continue to write against this government. I continue writing my columns against Bolsonaro administration. And I think in Brazil, although you are facing this government, there is a rising of the social movement in Brazil, especially the Black movement in Brazil. So this is, at the same time, you have Bolsonaro, there is a rising of social movement in Brazil that we protect us somehow.
Laura or Tito, would you like to give any answer to that question?
Can you ask the question again, Ashley? Sorry.
Yes. The question says, my question has to do whether and how the rising and cyclic authoritarianism and violence in the hemisphere has affected your writing, activism, and networking.
Well, I have to leave my country. It's that simple. I feel like how I see it, I just see it like every white um, every white government is a colonizer government. It's a plantator government. So sometimes, you know, the white left have this idea that because it says communist or socialist, it's gonna change something, but actually don't. So and if you have doubts, go to Cuba. No, like I feel like Cuba is the great experiment to try European structures of ideas of the world into the Caribbean, which is a very different history, no? So for me personally, I have to go, and I am not the person who is like being under the Cuban government censorship, you know. So I feel like what I'm trying to say is like I am not at the same risk that the Jamila is, no. But at the same time, I think like what a lot of people just call migrate or irse, it's a historical process of forced displacement. So a lot of activists and thinkers, so a lot of Black people have to migrate. And in the case of Cuba, I see it like a forced migration of Black intellectuals, of Black artists, Black activists. So we cannot function articulated to even question that system. And my presence here in the southeast of Mexico, I feel kind of like the same. I live in San Cristobal de las Casas, which is a white settler project, a neoliberal project over many indigenous communities, and this dream of zapatismo is a how can I say? It's oh damn, es una justificación, it's a justification. So neocolonials projects of whiteness came and gentrificate the space, no? So my experience here is the same. It's like if you want to participate in the process of in the political spaces, in the spaces of power, if you want to survive economically, you need to shut up. You need to follow the white plantators' rules. It's the same. At least that's how I feel it. But a distinction here is that I feel it also in Cuba, but I learned this when I wasn't in Cuba. Even though that now that I'm away from Cuba, I can see it muy contundente. And it's that the project of mestizaje, which also exists in Brazil, and I don't know, but it has to exist in some way in Costa Rica. It exists in all the Aviala. It gives us this idea, the democracia racial, no? But at the end, this democracia racial, the only thing that do is to sustain white minority, no? Or what the indigenous studies in the United States or Canada call, how can I say, the colonial settler studies, the colonial settler project, no? So for me, this colonial settler project historically is not new, and it works. It works perfectly everywhere, killing, isolating, in the process of breaking your mind, breaking your health mentality. It has so many tools, so we Black people don't get our shit together and create the unia again, you know. So I just feel like, because I learned that this, like I cannot criticize the Cuban government here in San Cristobal. It's like that. I couldn't do it in Cuba, and I cannot do it here, because the white left is also another project of whiteness. And because it's another project of whiteness, even though it could be more cool, it still romanticizes the idea that a white man is gonna free the black people. That's a lie. This is the very, like, activist Tito talking, not academic Tito, because so. But I want to say is like we shouldn't the same way that we have Bolsonaro. No, we have Trump. He's a white man. We cannot expect nothing from white men. That's it. Punto. No, and because of that, I feel like these left ideas of ideology structure that came from Marx, that we all said, I know so many Black people that we agree on this thing that Marx did. It works for Germany from the 19th century. It cannot work in the place where Germany was benefit from and building their colonialism and building their empire. It's impossible. So I know what the damage of Marxism did, because I live it in my country. I live it in myself. No? So this idea of socialism in a plantation island es una mentira. But the assumption that it's gonna work, that this white left sustains so strongly, for me, it's a conspiracy that whiteness to sustain whiteness, like como whiteness from the global north and the colonial settler in the global south. So I don't buy that, you know. But questioning that white complicitly is so strong in Latin America that it doesn't, how can I say, it's unbreakable. That's why we cannot question and say that we don't have a socialist country, that we have a dictatorship in my country. That's why there's so many white people in charge of Black studies, in charge of Latin America. The whole idea of Latin America studies is complicated. Latin American what? That's a reference to Latin, to Greeks, who are that white people use to to reference themselves as the core of the humanity. We all know that. Why we keep using that name? Oh my God, I'm never gonna be invited to another talk. I just want to say that the whole reference of the diversity of this continent is is established by whiteness. No, and if we keep if we keep seeing using those terms, lo seguimos sosteniendo. No, and the way that we sustain this, it doesn't allow us to understand the profound racist, anti-black racism that holds the left, the feminism, the environmental movement. I learned that here. Like I of course I came from Cuba. I didn't know anything about environmental issues, nada, nada, nada. But then I came here to Chiapas, and I live next to the river, and I haven't seen the effects of the nature in people. I have seen, and I have lived, the experience of the nature in people where the nature is so damaged. So now I understand, sadly, I'm sorry, sadly, now I understand what Laura Huss said, that they came and teach us about environmental. It's like, but the most important thing, Laura, I don't know if you can talk about it, is that the people who come and teach us about environmental issues are white people, who are the same people that have their extraction companies, their miners, that who are using their tools to erase the forest. They're so nice Canadians, no, who are so nice, but they're killing la ceiba la candona here, so, and they are giving money to ONGs, so educate us about environmental. It's like, if we went for the black communities and the indigenous communities, we wouldn't have a world still, because those are the communities who are like fighting for that, no? So,
If I,
Yes, I.
yeah, if I can say because we will have to end soon, unfortunately, because
sorry.
No worries, no worries, Tito. That was magnificent. Let me see. Since we don't have a lot of time, first I want to answer a little bit about the question and then go to what Tito was letting us know. The cyclic violence adopt different ways in different countries. Let me see. You can find it explicitly or implicitly. And as Tito said also, for instance, okay, let me try, I'm organizing my ideas because I'm trying to be very brief. The violence adopts different forms, as I said, in different countries, okay? Some are very explicit, some are more implicit, some are very subtle. I cannot come out here and the world have an idea or a stereotype of Costa Rica and its democracy. It's non-armed democracy, okay? And that everybody is pura vida and everybody's living the hottest life, and that because we have an African descent vice president, then automatically every African descent Costa Rican is to the highest place of decision making. That is a lie. That is a symbolic representation of Afro-Costa Rican, not demeriting the efforts of our sister and her struggle, because she comes from our same Central American Black organization process, etc. But understanding, as Tito said, the powers that are behind the power doesn't look like us, okay? And the nexus between this cyclic violence and authoritarianism, there's a common nexus, and it brings discrimination, space segregation. I don't know how you say rechazo. Okay, rechazo to our culture and our values, and they openly practice that violence to the person who reclaim their culture and their way of seeing life or their cosmovision, or to the collective, showing in certain cases ethnic cleaning as the most criminal of its expression. And I want to bring to the table some examples, like the Garinagus in Honduras open murders and kidnapping that is going on as we speak. For what reason? For the reason of opposing to sell their lands, their ancestral lands that are the richest lands close to the coast, where they have inhabited for hundreds of years. So that is one of the examples of how this cyclic violence take different forms. And in Costa Rica, for example, we still have a juridic insecurity of the territories that have been inhabited ancestrally by our people, and on which our people have contributed to the economic sustainability of this country. That is an example of that cyclic violence, and the violence take different forms. Of course, our country says that yes, we are having laws on paridad, when it comes to election, 50-50 men and women, but among that 50% of women, how many African or Black women are? So this concept, when our countries are talking about, yes, we're doing this and we're doing that, and we're progressing and we have this beautiful democracy, we need to understand that democracy is not a state, it's an action. And that is also deep in the sense that many of these laws and these I'm trying to tell you something politically correct, but it's so hard right now. But the idea of these definitions of what is democracy and what is socialismo, or whatever thing that is happening in our countries, these definitions belong to the definers, not to the defined. So when we understand in this the intricacies of the word we love to use, intersectionality, of us being women of African descent and women of Black African descent also, because that is the next discussion, and that is the next eye-opening topic that we also need to discuss. We need to understand what the intersectionality and the social categorization, ya se me enredó el español y en inglés, such as the race, or whatever, the concept of the ethnicity, the class, the gender, and how they apply to the group, and how overlapping them, and in these systems of discrimination and disadvantages for privilege, how all this makes the cyclic violence or the authoritarianism not being so cyclic. I would call it, it's a permanent for our communities. Just that the intensity or the decibeles may go up or go down, and the media, going back to the media would showcase it whenever it benefits their rhetoric or the aims or objectives they have at that moment. But right now, you can turn on any major source of information to the world. You're not hearing about the murder of the Garinagu people, or the murder of an Afro-Costa Rican youngster killed 2 years ago in the midst of a protest in order to avoid the fiscal reform in Costa Rica. You're not going to hear that because how are you going to portray Costa Rica? And he was killed allegedly, as every witness saw, by a police. But you don't hear about that. You hear about what happened. The focus goes elsewhere. So that is what the cyclic violence in our communities looks like. And as I said before, it can be subtle, it can be direct or indirect. It can have you thinking that, no, maybe it's my head, it's my mind that is, you know, it plays with your mental health at times. So we as African descent, as people as African descent in the Americas and as women, I think we understand clearly the proposal, the next step that we need to do in order to keep bringing down the barriers, the borders, and anything that try to keep dividing us or entertaining us and not allowing us to have the best life and the best communities in our region.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful way to end this incredible conversation. Thank you, gracias, obrigada, dalu in my language Igbo, for y'all's time, for y'all's energies, for your space. Thank you for the participants. Sorry we couldn't get through all the Q&A. It was just, I wish this could go on and I could cook for y'all and we sit around a table and just talk, inshallah, one day when we're free. Yeah. Until then, everyone take good care. And we'll be posting this. It will be available soon, and hopefully we'll also have a translation so that it could be distributed widely. Thank you all again, and yeah, take good care. Bye-bye.